Hello again, and I'll carry on with the story of Mattie where I left off. Mattie woke early in the spring. Although it was only the first week of March, the weather was warm and sunny. The blackbirds were building their mud-lined nests in the hedge above the flower pot, and Mattie woke to their song. She felt dazed and hungry after her long sleep. She had forgotten all the unpleasant things which had happened to her during the previous summer. Slugs and snails had survived the mild winter in their thousands, so there was plenty of food in the gardens for her. But she already had her meal of bread and milk before she set out for her night's hunting. Like all hedgehogs, she has an enormous appetite. One night, towards the end of March, she came across a strange hedgehog hunting in the double hedge along the line. A young boar who had been driven away from home by his father. After crossing several fields and crawling through a number of hedges, he had picked up Mattie's scent. For 3 nights he had hung round the lane. He was afraid of the scent of humans and would not go into the garden in search of her. Mattie was now 3 years old and past the prime of her life. Few wild hedgehogs live longer than 3 years because the hazards of their existence are so great. Sometimes an exceptionally strong and healthy specimen like Mattie's father, the old boar, would live to the grand old age of 5 or 6, but this is very unusual. Mattie was beginning to feel old. She greeted the young boar without much enthusiasm, touching her snout to his and following where he led. They ran together for several weeks. But the boar was wild, and Mattie was half tame. She liked to hunt in the safety of the gardens, and he wanted the wilderness of the waste. They slept in a nest which they'd made in the double hedge, and there Mattie's young were born in the first week of May. There were 5 of them, 3 females and 2 males, the largest litter she had ever had. As soon as the youngsters were old enough, Mattie took them for a feed of bread and milk each evening. Her mate hunted alone and would not go with his family to the bread and milk dish. They saw him less and less often, until in the end he went to live on the waste, where he soon mated with another sow and was never seen again in the gardens. Mattie was now on very friendly terms with the woman of the house. She no longer put up her bristles when she came to feed at the dish. She slicked them down so that in the half light her back looked as if it was covered with coarse hair. She was very, very proud of her 5 babies. She allowed the woman to handle them freely. The little hedgehogs were fat and healthy. They gorged themselves on bread and milk every evening when they played on the concrete surrounds of the house, belching contentedly until Mattie led them away to hunt over the gardens. One evening they found a sparrow's nest, which had been torn out of the hedge by Amelia Dart's cat. 4 blue eggs were smashed on the ground, and the hedgehogs lapped up the broken yolks and found them good to eat. None of them had tasted eggs before then. And there is a picture, if I can find it very quickly. I think you can see of them eating it. Look, they found the nest and they're eating the yolks that have been spoiled by the cat on the floor. A few days later, Mattie crawled under the wire netting of Jack Balton's hen run soon after dawn and found a newly laid egg in the nest box. Its smell reminded her of the tasty feed which she and her young ones had had from the sparrow's nest, but try as she would, she could not open her mouth wide enough to crack the shell, and she could not roll the egg out of the box to break it. She gave up in disgust. Hedgehogs will eat hens' eggs, which are laid wild, if they can roll them down a slope and break them. They also steal birds' eggs at times, but only if the nest is built low enough for them to reach. They are good climbers, but they seldom go to the trouble of robbing a nest which is not easily accessible. They can usually find all the food they want on the ground. It's sometimes said that hedgehogs eat pheasants' eggs, but this is not true. A hen pheasant is well able to protect her family, and she will peck out the eyes of any animal rash enough to try and steal her eggs or her young. Mattie's family grew up without any mishaps. By the end of June they were able to hunt on their own, and their mother usually went along to the bread and milk dish. She slept in the flower pot again, and the youngsters lay wherever they chose. Sometimes they slept in the double hedge, and sometimes in a patch of papas grass in Amelia Dart's garden. It was a beautiful summer. The days were still and sunny, and the nights were lit by 1,000,000 stars. There was a bumper strawberry crop, and the woman from the bread and milk house covered hers with pieces of old net curtain material to protect them from the birds. At night the sun-soaked fruit gave off a warm, sweet smell which attracted the young hedgehogs, and they came and poked their heads under the nest to steal a few berries. One morning the woman found one of the young urchins with a piece of curtain wrapped around and around his little body. In his efforts to break free, the little thief had nearly strangled himself. She soon cut the net away, and the little hedgehog scampered off, none the worse for his adventure. At the end of the lane, where the waste began, there was an old tumble-down stone wall which had originally marked the boundary of the Clay Company's land. Years of wind, rain and frost had fretted away the mortar, and the stones were perched precariously on top of each other. Each winter, when the frost came, they caused a bit of the wall to collapse, and the spaces left between the stones provided hiding places for snails. In dry weather, the hedgehogs could usually find food here. Mattie and her family were scrambling about on this wall one night in July. The stones were still warm from the sun, and the hedgehogs were happily crawling in and out of the gaps in the wall, picking up snails as they went. Mattie found a large cluster of snails glued together in a hollow near the top of the wall, and she was unable to reach them with her snout or her paws, so she started to scratch at the mortar with her claws. It was old and rotten, and she soon scraped away so much that she was almost able to reach the snails. Then there was a sharp cracking sound, and she fell heavily to the ground, a big stone coming down at the same time. The hedgehogs had no time to crawl up to protect herself from injury, and the stone hit one of her hind legs and broke it like a stick. Mattie lay on the ground, half stunned. She tried to curl up, but a terrible pain shot through her leg when she tried to fold it against her body to roll. She could not understand what had happened to her, and she was too frightened to move. The youngsters had run off in terror when the stone had fallen, and she lay there alone until dawn, when the sky, brightening in the east, warmed her and told her that she must hide. Limping painfully on 3 legs, she dragged herself slowly down the lane, her broken leg dangling helplessly, and when it touched the ground, spasms of pain shot through her body. Her eyes dazzled by the morning light, she limped awkwardly along, and it was nearly noon when at last she crept under the garden gate and reached the safety of the flower pot. Well, it looks like someone intersects her, because look, if you look at this, you can see that she's got a bandage on her little back leg. So that obviously is going to be what we read next. So I'll leave that for now, because that's 2 lots I've put on. And I will finish this book, and I'm sorry I've been a bit here-there with it, but I've had a few weeks of upset and that, so hopefully we'll get to the end of this book. Maybe, if you want, I can find another book, but you let me know. Okay, thanks everyone, I love you. Kisses from me. And kisses, obviously, for Mattie and the family.